fascinated with people who want to do carnivore so badly, who know they really need to do it for the sake of their health, and yet cannot stay on the diet for more than a day or two. And it's because I battled with this fiercely in my own carnivore journey. In my food addiction episode, I read to you a journal entry from when I fell off the wagon, where I lamented that my reasons for doing carnivore were so compelling. No other diet had ever eliminated all of my health problems, and yet I kept finding myself succumbing to tempting foods that I know hurt my body. I didn't understand how I could keep doing that to myself when I wanted health and healing so much. And there are many aspects that play into the issue of compliance or being able to stay on the carnivore diet. It's never one thing, it's always many little things. But one absolutely crucial aspect for doing carnivore consistently that is missing for most people is integrity. We're going to talk about what that is in a second, but integrity is something that's very hard to find in today's world. And many people aren't even aware that they compromise their own integrity almost every day, because it has become so part of our modern culture to say things you don't mean, to not follow through on things you said you were going to do. And one of the big places where this shows up is with health and eating. One of my favorite pieces of writing I have ever read on integrity is a paper by the late Michael Jensen called Integrity. Without it, nothing works. And in this paper, here's how he defines integrity. Integrity is a matter of a person's word, nothing more and nothing less. He actually emphasizes that integrity has nothing to do with good versus bad. That's part of what differentiates integrity from morality and ethics. He gives the example of the law of gravity and how there is no such thing as good gravity or bad gravity. It just is. Integrity is keeping your word, period. It is following through on something that you said you're going to do. And wow, was this paper sobering the first time I read it, because I could see that integrity was missing in many places of my life. And this was especially apparent with my eating. Here's what things looked like when it was really bad and I was at rock bottom. I'd have a big binge and then I'd say to myself, that's it. This has to stop. I am starting 30 days of strict carnivore effective immediately. It begins now. And I do it for a day or two, maybe a week, but then give into some cookies or whatever other sugary thing presented itself to me. I wouldn't make it to the 30 days that I had said I'd do. And I would just keep going back and forth between flying off the rails and recommitting to some sort of set goal, but then never actually follow through with it. And what happened is probably obvious. My word became meaningless. It became impossible to take myself seriously because over and over again, I said stuff that I never actually followed through on. One of the points that Michael Jensen talks about in the paper is that there is a lot of self-deception about being out of integrity. He says, people are mostly unaware that they have not kept their word. All they see is the reason, rationalization, or excuse for not keeping their word. In fact, people systematically deceive, lie to themselves about who they have been and what they have done. And he later says, if you think this is not you, you are fooling yourself. If you think about it for a minute, I think it's pretty apparent how pervasive out of integrity behavior has become all around us. He points out that it is rampant in large organizations and on an individual level, but I feel like it has completely permeated our modern culture. It has become commonplace to ghost people, to not follow through on things, to say things that there's just no way you can actually follow through on. And no one really holds anyone accountable for most of this stuff, which only normalizes this out of integrity behavior. In the paper, he says, if you are serious about being a person of integrity, you will think very carefully before giving your word to anyone or anything. The example from my life that I just told you about, where I had hit rock bottom and felt trapped in this vicious cycle of recommitting over and over again to set carnivore eating periods, but then never actually following through, I didn't think carefully about what I was actually agreeing to. I did not think about the fact that in committing to 30 days of carnivore, for example, I would also be agreeing to moments of discomfort and difficulty. In the paper, Michael Jensen talks about how a lot of times when people give their word, they're merely placating someone. They're not thinking about what it will take to keep their word. They generally intend to keep it, but if anything makes it difficult to follow through on, they give reasons instead of the results. And indeed, I had a lot of reasons for why I kept falling off the wagon and giving in to non-carnivore foods against my word. And at the time, they seemed like good reasons, unique reasons that were different every single time. But when I took a step back and took a good look at those reasons with the frame of integrity and the reality that I had completely destroyed my own sense of self-trust, I could see how destructive it all was. So if this pattern of not following through on carnivore eating is at play in your life, how do you fix it? First, I recommend reading the paper I've been discussing in this episode. Michael Jensen spells out more detailed parameters around integrity that are really profound and important to think about. But ultimately, the way to fix this is very simple. You have to rebuild your own trust by honoring your word. You have to be thoughtful about what you say and then actually follow through on things if you say you are going to do them. And this takes time. Your relationship with yourself is just like a relationship with anyone else in that sense. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen instantly. If you have a friend who is always late and then all of a sudden they actually start showing up at the time that they said they would, you're not going to believe it at first. Whether or not you've verbalized it consciously, you likely view that person as unreliable because of your experience with them. And if you think about what it would take for your view of them to change to a person who is reliable, that wouldn't happen after one instance of them showing up on time. It would probably take several times, or perhaps more, depending on how long of a history there is. Likewise, the time to rebuild your own trust will vary depending on the circumstances. But how it's rebuilt all boils down to one thing: being careful about what you say you're going to do and then actually doing it. That means only saying you'll do things that you can actually achieve right now. Maybe you can't do 30 days of carnivore. Maybe that's too daunting from the place you're at right now. Well, then what can you do? Can you commit to a week? If that still seems too daunting, what about one day? One day might sound silly, but that is where people sometimes have to begin in order to start meeting their word and practicing behavior with integrity. Once you start building up that self-trust again and strengthening that follow-through muscle, it becomes very doable to start lengthening that time. As hard as it is to find integrity out in the world around us, we have the choice right now to create it for ourselves and have it in our own lives. Take your words seriously and follow through on the things that you decide are worth pursuing. Your health is worth the effort. If you need help with doing carnivore consistently, maybe you find yourself raiding the pantry when you're bored or stressed, or maybe you can't stop late night snacking or eating the chocolate that you said you were buying for your kids, join my program, Carnivore Eating Mastery. This course will teach you how to stop eating for reasons other than sustenance. It will teach you how to regain control over your eating so that you can stop falling off the wagon and successfully follow a carnivore diet and change your health. This is specifically for people who love sweets and comfort foods and know that these foods are hurting them and that they need to give them up but can't stop going back. Go to www.theroadtocarnivore.com to sign up for the waitlist, and I will let you know when I teach the next round, or you can click the link in the description box.